do that now. There you go. Yeah, cheers for doing this. It's fucking a bit of a pleasure to have you on. You're kind of in my list. I've got a list on my phone of people who I wanted to get on a podcast when I started this, and you're pretty much at the top. So yeah.
Don't tell me.
Yeah, it's mainly because I want to ask you, and I'm trying. Clearly, I think I'm out of my league here because I want to try.
I should say I'm honored, and it's privilege, and you know I appreciate what you're doing, and you know it's anybody in this space who's kind of who. It's obvious you're in service is part of what you're doing. So, you know, it's
I hope so.
You know, so, well, it is. So, anyway, so, I'm honored.
Thank you. That's sweet. I'm going to try not let it get run away like it did with Rob, where we ended up spending the first 20 minutes just talking music. But before even introducing him as a name or anything, but, one of the reasons one of the things I always wanted to get to, because in loads of podcasts and loads of chat, it always comes up with like, you know, you grew up like a punk kid, and like, it's always the same with Andrew Huberman as well. I want to try and chat to him about it as well, but he might be out of my league for a while. But growing up a punk kid.
Good luck on that. I know like huge podcasts that can't get him because
exactly. So busy and
so buried in work and him and the shit he's doing.
Oh man. And it's so good as well, the work he's doing. Unreal. Yeah. Man, that podcast is just
blown up.
Education for everyone. So punk rock, we're going to start with that briefly because I am a hardcore punk kid myself. I've got some hot water music tattoos on my chest and whatever else. But yeah, one of the things I have been finding, and throughout all of these chats I've been doing with people who, so my podcast is called Move, Breathe, Live. And so I'm trying to get movement people, breathing people, hopefully, and people who just want to live, I guess, and hopefully educating in some way for them to live a better life. But there's this overarching thing of so many people who seem to get into this space, grew up as like punk rock kids or like metal kids. And it kind of just really got me thinking of like, in my head, I know that like punk directed me. I mean, I was never like a wild kid as such, but it definitely like just gave me an outlet but also I think like a community as well, which I kind of feel is kind of missing in a lot of mainstream stuff. And I think from my perspective, I was like, how, you know, do you kind of see that like the punk side of things has kind of given you like a branch to think outside the box?
My foundation is being punk.
Yeah.
But you know, I mean, I started listening to punk rock, fifth grade,
right.
And fifth.
Which, how old is that? Just because I'm not sure what that is in UK to Americans.
I would say that's probably around 9 or 10.
Okay, cool. And what was your experience of punk rock at that time? What bands?
Exploited, Agent Orange, Dead Kennedys,
badass.
You know, Sex Pistols. You know, I wasn't really into New York punk,
right?
But I mean, I grew up in Orange County, California, so
yeah.
And I mean, I don't talk about this a lot, but it's a fact. The fact is I grew up in a very, very in a hotbed of punk and skinhead.
Yeah.
It was full, like there were so many skinheads were the thing. And I was friends with a lot of skinheads and I hung out with skinheads. I didn't understand that.
No.
It wasn't until I actually was in a moment right around high school, beginning of high school, like 9th grade, where I separated myself from that. And I was like, that's not, I'm not that guy. And I never shaved down any of that. But I was fucking young, man. But it was my outlet, and they were the people that understood that I felt connected to.
Yeah.
I rebellious. I was very rebellious. I did not like authority. I did not like being told what to do. I loved having the freedom to choose what I wanted to do.
Yeah.
That either makes me extremely punk rock or American.
Yeah, maybe that's why.
Or both.
Maybe that's why you know, punk grew up out of America. Do you know what I mean? Like,
potentially. I mean, look, it was in the you know, like I listened to, you know, plenty of UK punk, but you know, it helped me understand a lot. But I moved from punk to metal in high school.
okay.
And found a new group of friends because of this separation that began to occur. You know, I got into sports, etc., but I always been into sports.
Yeah.
That was probably my saving grace from a lot of damage that I saw a lot of other friends go through and still go through. But I got into metal, and then it was like I got into things like the Grateful Dead.
Yeah.
Like all of a sudden I started getting dosed with all this just eclectic mix of stuff. And then when I actually got out of high school, you know, I cleaned up pretty early on. Before I turned 24, I got totally clean and had to change my life. And I was mentored by a guy who like took me to the Philharmonic and introduced me to classical and opera.
Nice.
And I got a minor education, not a lot, but I got some education in that stuff and got to understand the arts. And I got to see where and how punk and metal and all of these things start. Like, I was like, wow, oh, like Bach's kind of the metal guy of like, you know, classic, you know, at any rate, you know, I always understood that I was not different, but that I wanted the ability to choose what I wanted to do. And I was never going to follow the classical way of doing anything.
Yeah. Which is definitely kind of, I guess, like, of all of the, I mean, there's a whole group of, I mean, these days you can't look left or right on social media without seeing breathing people popping up here and there and everywhere, which is brilliant in many ways. But I think I spoke, when I was speaking to Rob about it, I kind of said there's you know, and I had Patrick McEwen on my podcast a few weeks ago, and I've done the Oxygen Advantage, and you know, I think he's done some amazing work. But I kind of feel at the moment, in particular with his work, there's a lot of people who are just parroting and copying kind of what he said. And I kind of, with you today, I don't really want to dive too much into breathing, because it's, you know, I've had breathing people on. What I kind of want to look at more is kind of stress, I guess, and life bits. And
good.
I
don't even consider myself a breathing guy.
No, I mean, that's the thing. I've never really, you know, when I was kind of getting really into sort of all of these breathing people online and stuff, you were kind of like that guy who, in my head, I don't know, probably haven't said, but we haven't even introduced you. We'll fucking do that in a minute anyway. But I'm a nurse as a background. I've got a background in cardiology and in A&E, and I was at this stage fed up with like people coming into the hospital, and you're already trying to deal with them after the horse has bolted. And I'm not saying that a lot of the breathwork people aren't trying to do that, but there's a bigger picture. And I always kind of felt that the work that you and Rob and Emily and stuff are doing is much more bigger picture. And so one of the best things I think I've ever seen you post anyway, was like a 10-minute monologue of like primary emotions, I think it was.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. And to me, that was just like, it just sung to everything like that I was feeling and thought, and how we can try to view things. And so, yeah, that's kind of going to be where the start point is when I've introduced you, because I'll better do that. I'm going to put a fucking intro in the beginning, but never mind. So I got Brian on my podcast today. And so, Brian, do you want to just give us a quick say hello? I don't know, introduce yourself, say who you are, what you are.
Sure.
Apart from a punk kid.
Brian Mackenzie, and I I guess you could say I'm a coach of sorts. I mentor a lot of people. I work with a lot of athletes, a lot of people in different areas, whether it's sport or it's corporate or military or law enforcement or firearm. I do a lot of different stuff, but it all revolves around stress.
Yeah.
And how we manage stress. And my background in the last 20 years has really, it started with getting a dosing of movement. Movement was basically my foundation of training and understanding that. I got into strength and conditioning. I kind of created a little bit of a paradigm shift in the endurance world very early on in my career when we looked at lowering volume and endurance training and increasing strength and conditioning to complement the endurance training. But we used skill-based approach to endurance training, meaning we were really using skills and drills to reprogram the nervous system and the way the body moved, and then coupling that with strength and conditioning. So I wrote a couple books on that. One was Power, Speed, Endurance. The other one was Unbreakable Runner, which was a New York Times bestseller. And then I wrote a third book with Andy Galpin called Unplugged. And Andy and I have been friends now for quite some time. But he was somebody who questioned what I was doing, especially at the breath space in the beginning.
Right.
And he didn't believe a lot of what I was saying was going on. And I finally got him to come and do some stuff at my facility. And that was kind of one of the spearheading points in terms of relationships with scientists, because he got to see firsthand what I was doing was beyond what they were talking about with inside textbook.
Yeah.
And I'm not an academic, right? Like I'm just not. I'm an experiential person, so I read a lot. I go through a lot, but I kind of apply a lot. And so my movement background moved more into this understanding of, well, what's going on inside the body?
Yeah.
And so looked at the physiology, and then kind of when we stumbled on the breathing thing, I did probably 8 years ago or 9 years ago at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It just flipped my lid that we weren't thinking about this in terms of how we were approaching training, because of what we were getting out of a resistance breathing device for organization of the body and movement standards.
Yeah.
It changed the way we moved when we put a resistance breathing device on somebody's face. And I was like, oh my God. And then we figured out, oh, you've got a resistance breathing device on your face. It's called a nose. And so then I was like, well, I wonder what this is doing, like from a physiological standpoint. And I had yet to read really anything. I had gone through Buteyko stuff.
Yeah.
I had Buteyko information. I had already, I actually, not a lot of people know this, but I spent a lot of time with Wim Hof. I was very close to Wim Hof very early on. He spent the night at my house. He's stayed at my house before.
Yeah.
We brought him to LA. Laird, when Laird and I were working together and training together. And I then started to get into understand breathing and the brain and what was going on with that, because I was experiencing such considerable changes in how I was starting to look at training and why.
Yeah.
So I started to understand the neurobiology of stuff, just from a basic standpoint, and enough to be dangerous about it. Right. Yeah. We saw the total circle of what breathing was doing. But the thing is breathing is just simply, so when we voluntarily breathe, or we consciously breathe, that's how we manage stress.
Mm-hmm.
When we're not in control of it, that's respiration. So that's how energies actually, even though we can manipulate energy through control of breath, we're actually manipulating how we're dealing with, how we're managing stress, where when we let it go and it's unconscious, this is respiration. This is how we're actually moving energy, right? Because this is what's going on most of the day.
Yeah.
So what were the byproducts of what we were doing with training and controlling energy, and then, or controlling stress, and then the variable of like what happened to the body afterwards and how we managed stress throughout the day and how energy was moving. And the fact is stress and energy, you cannot separate. We want to separate them. We want to talk about them like that. And we want to talk about everything as though it's this separate thing. But the fact is there's matter, there's energy, and and things need to die in order for that to happen.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
You cannot change any of that. It just is what it is. And this is going on right now. And it's not happening in the past, and it's not happening in the future. It's just happening now. And it's really hard to wrap our heads around that. And that's where kind of the deeper side of this stuff goes. And where like, you have to look into what the spiritual teachers are talking about, because there's a reality that we're not understanding, that we're all trying to play in outside of that reality. And this is why we're such a really messed up place, is because we're constantly like not dealing with a past or things that happen, then trying to predict a future that we have no way of predicting because we're not in the present.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Good friend of mine, Peter Crone, talks about this real well. And, but there's physiological consequences for all of this. So the cells, we now understand, well, most scientists now understand or believe that each cell in our body has its own consciousness, right? So you've got all of these receptor and effector protein sites on a cell. So these are things that take in information. So think of it as your five senses, right? So the five senses take in information with those proteins, and then there's action that occurs as a result of that information. Emotions play into these things.
Yeah.
And I can't go into the details of how emotions occur or any of that. I'm not a scientist like that, but I do know that we've got this limbic system that's constantly working, and we are hardwired up through as emotional beings, as most species are on this planet, right? Like, so most animals deal with what are, like, this is what you talked about in the beginning, primary emotions.
Yeah.
Emotions were never intended. Emotions are not intended to be these long-term things.
Yeah, exactly.
They're intended to be these short-term things, but we've made life so comfortable, and we've domesticated ourselves so much that we're living in this thing where we're growing out how we're supposed to feel, like we're supposed to be happy all the time.
Yeah. And then if you're bullshit. If you're not, then
which is, yeah. And I've mentored a couple people who are just the happiest people in the world all the time. And it's, and I'm like, so what were your parents like? They're like, they're happy too. And I'm like, so do you think that's weird that you're doing what they do? Like, but you're not supposed to be angry all the time either. You're not supposed to be sad all the time either. Like, you're supposed to be sad when things are sad, and but you're not supposed to hang on to these things.
But also, those things that can be sad can be there for a reason. Do you know what I mean? It, like, or, being sad could be a positive sad, or it could be a negative sad. I know it's a kind of, do you know what I mean? And the problem is the same with anger. Like, I think you mentioned in that little video, but you could be angry for a very legitimate reason, and that anger could save your life or save your partner's life or something. Or you could be angry because you've just not dealt with shit.
Correct. So my 20 years or so has become this kind of amalgamation of really understanding human behavior, and it coming down to helping people understand stress. And the interesting thing about being human being is that we are the only species that voluntarily engages in stress in order to get what we want. or create an adaptation.
So would you say that in a, like, i.e. we voluntarily go and chuck ourselves in an ice bath, or
Correct.
Or
Correct.
sauna,
Lift,
or, you know, run fucking
run.
5,000 miles or whatever.
Go for a run, or you know, like, right, like, or have sex.
Yeah.
Beyond procreating.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Like, I know I'm gonna get a feeling after, you know, I know something's gonna happen after that, right? Like,
yeah.
Done deal. Like, why is it other animals only engage seasonally in this?
Yeah, that is true, isn't it?
Okay.
Yeah.
So, you know, and I mean, look, there's nuances in there, but the fact is consciously we are the only species that really engages in stress throughout our entire day. I wake up and I go do something, usually that requires energy. That's a stressor. That's a stimulant.
Yeah.
I'm looking for a return on that somewhere, right? So we understand there's adaptive processes in that. Everybody does this in some capacity throughout their day. Unfortunately, the problem is that because of the domestication of man, we've lost sight of this, and we're handing over way too much power to others.
Yeah.
To make it convenient for us to not have to engage in these things.
Yeah.
Knowingly, right?
Yeah.
Like, I can just order and I partake in this. I can just order a package and it'll be here by the end of the day or by tomorrow.
Yeah.
Right? Like, so how does that have anything to do with what we're doing? That just dulled my understanding of a process that used to take a lot of work, right? And so what about my day then becomes, well, now I don't have to do as much as a result of it.
But then what's the you know, and this, you know, this is where I kind of see from my background, and I just did a post today about like, my wife had the car because she was driven in, so I basically I had to walk 25 minutes into town with my laundry to go to the laundrette. I'm living in a van at the moment, so I had to take 7-10 kilos of laundry down to the laundrette, do all the washing, walk the dogs as well, then go and collect it all, then walk the dogs again, then walk home. And it was kind of like, I've given my, do you know what I mean? Not by removing that whole element of stress, like, people, it seems absolutely baffling for someone to the idea of walking to do something to increase the stress, because everything's become so comfortable. But the problem, you know, and then this just kind of goes on, and it kind of always reminds me of Wall-E. Like, I mean, that's, as far as a Disney film is concerned, it's pretty bloody accurate. Do you know what I mean?
We're pretty much there.
Yeah. And it's kind of that thing of, one of the things I kind of, maybe you can dive into, because you'll probably, well, I know from your videos you'll be able to explain it reasonably well. People avoid those feelings. So, you know, me hiking down there, you know, it wasn't hard at the end of the day. I'm fit and active, whatever else. But for somebody doing that, they would be like, it would be outrageous, the idea of like carrying bags. And so they run away from that feeling, which is essentially the stress. You know, they've been given that stress. So that stress that people run away from. And I know, as I've just said, but your videos, you'll explain it well, that CO2 being like the stress molecule. And maybe just briefly, what, you know, how, you know, I know I've heard you previously say, but everything has a cost. So whether it be physical, whether it be mental, whether it be playing chess, and as Sapolsky says, burning 6,000 calories playing fucking stress, which people are blown away when they hear that. But everything has a cost. Like, there's always a cost to burning energy. So maybe, so people have an idea that when they're feeling that, whether it be having to go and do something they don't want to do, or, you know, ice baths, for instance, the idea freaks them out before they even get in the pool. So again, those emotions. Can you just kind of perhaps break down CO2 for us, and then how that's the driver of, or, you know, a primary driver of this stuff?
Well, it's what we believe right now is one of the primary drivers, right? The carbon dioxide basically is, so it's the end product of, it's a byproduct of aerobic and anaerobic cellular respiration, one of the byproducts. And that needs to exit the system, but it also, you need this stuff in the system in order to actually help use oxygen and make oxygen actually bioavailable and contain it to a degree to where it doesn't become too oxidative inside the system. So reactive oxygen species. So think, I mean, we're literally oxidizing from the inside out slowly. The less healthy we get, we start the reactive oxygen species starts to like kill, like we oxidize
attack us more.
And attacks more free radicals, right? Like, so you just become more, let's not call it septic, but you just get a little bit more like you age quicker, and aging is nothing more than keeping up with the damage that's being done from this type of stuff, right?
Yeah.
And so we don't want to speed up mitosis or cellular turnover, right? You don't want cells rapidly increase, like
multiplying and
duplicating and growing, right? That's what mitosis is. And that becomes cancerous, etc. But CO2 has become is what we're wired up to breathe, right? That's the trigger point for us to breathe. We inhale, the compounds that are in the air, 21% oxygen, nitrogen, etc. And a few other minor things, but 21% oxygen goes in, and most of that oxygen comes back out because we can't actually absorb all of that oxygen. But enough of that oxygen gets in that there's trillions of oxygen molecules that line up inside of a red blood cell. The only way for those oxygen molecules to come out is through carbon dioxide, right? You're always going to have some sort of carbon dioxide in the system.
Yeah.
But if I don't have enough, I don't release an efficient amount of the carbon dioxide, and the cells don't care how that works. They'll just flip to anaerobic, aerobic, and it'll last for less than 2 minutes at some point. And then finally it'll start to have to either use oxygen or die out, whatever. Our brain stem has respiration center in the pons that near the pons that are dialed in for detecting carbon dioxide with chemoreceptors in the aortic and carotid arteries mainly, although you've got sensors all over in the brain as well, because the brain wants to detect if that pH change happens. Higher CO2 means that we are becoming acidic, and pH becomes more acidic, which is a death sentence. Okay, we are so tightly monitored inside on how that pH changes, and CO2 plays that main role. Now, oxygen can play a role, but a lot of oxygen means more alkaline. And what happens when we become more alkaline is we are basically anesthetizing ourselves. We are basically becoming euphoric. We are becoming, it's like a drug. It's like dope, right? So you can get to a point to where you can make yourself super anesthetized, and then actually you can drop that oxygen low enough to where that same thing happens, to where you're starting to feel woozy or anesthetized.
Yeah.
This is where problems can occur because of the alkaline side, either the alkaline side or too low of oxygen side. And this is why carbon dioxide is the first respondent to, this is why we think carbon dioxide is the respondent to stress, right?
Yeah, yeah.
This is why we've seen with inside high anxiety patients, and this is scientifically done. Dr. Justin Feinstein's done a ton of work around this stuff with, bolus hits of CO2 and raising CO2, that people hit panic switches when they're given large doses of CO2.
Yeah.
And that adjusts based on metabolic output So if I work more, CO2 levels increase because energy demand increased, and or psychological emotional output suppresses my ability to actually tolerate more. So if I go and study my brains out or read something in depth and have a heavy duty conversation with somebody, and then I try and go hold my breath, I am not going to hold my breath if I were calm, relaxed, and chilled out, right?
Yeah.
So CO2 plays this role, but I'm certain there's a lot we don't understand, and I'm involved in a few things right now, where we're going to start to really uncover a lot of this stuff. But so when we exhale, what's happening is roughly 70% or so of all toxins in the body are excreted through breath, right? These are called volatile organic compounds, VOCs. So this tells us what toxins and things are coming out.
Yeah.
There's going to be way more for us to understand here in a very short period of time, that we're going to be able to understand exactly how somebody's burning and using energy, right? And the interesting thing is you talked about, like, chess players playing chess in a chess tournament and burning 6,000 calories in a day. And you can even endurance athletes will burn up to 10, 15,000 in a day, like just doing ultra endurance events. The interesting thing is, though, is that's not sustainable.
No. At
all. Even a chess player burning 6,000 calories, the sustainability mark is under 3,000, really. It's really this fine, and Herman Konstner wrote a book called Burn, and he really breaks this stuff down. And this is the importance of things like going for a walk and taking your laundry to the thing. Actively engaging is because you actually need to move energy from a physical standpoint, whether it's just walking or moving in some capacity to do that. And that's where the hack of working out or doing a yoga practice comes in. And to be very clear, these are hacks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Because that bringing that up, it kind of reminds me of, I don't know if you ever read it. I can't remember the guy's name. It's Stuart something. He wrote a book called The Science of Yoga. He was like a New York Times bestseller. He wrote this book, and it kind of always got me because he starts it off and he basically chats about how pre-exercise type stuff, pre 1930s, 40s, when it was like people with hard work, you just farm workers, manual laborers, blah, blah, blah. And people were like fairly fit, strong, healthy-ish people. And then all of a sudden everything got like, mechanized and whatever else. And all of a sudden it's like, well, we have to go and get fit. We have to go and do, and all of a sudden, then it's like everyone's got to be at the gym, got to do this, got to do that. And to me, he kind of missed the point of actually, if we kind of could get back to like just doing more stuff, like naturally, like just, you wouldn't have to hack and do the gym, do that. If you just, walked to the shops more with a bag on your back and put your shopping in that and walked home and, did your daily tasks that way. I know it's harder. Well, it's technically harder because people apparently work more and stuff, but physically, physical health wise, that's kind of the thing I always kind of felt was like, you don't have to do the gym just to be a healthy person.
Correct. Yeah. No, you're right. Like, we choose to do these things because we love the feeling.
Yeah.
And the adaptation that comes from these things. Yeah. Right. So, like, I enjoy being flexible.
Yeah.
In some regards.
Yeah.
Right. Like, my T-spine's a mess right now, and I want to get that more mobile.
Yeah.
And working better. So I'm in this pursuit of that change. I'm looking for an adaptation. Yes. Right. No animal participates in an exercise program.
No.
Yet we behave as though we could create a better training program for a lion.
Yes, 100%.
And where we lost it is what I believe is farming, agriculture.
Yeah.
We failed to look to nature, and we thought we could hack it, and you can't do that. And we've destroyed our ecosystems, the ground, etc. And I'm not going to get into a diatribe because I'll flip this on its head right now. It's like, look,
I'm with you.
There's a reason processed food is good. Some people don't have the advantage of getting to quality food. So processed food was created to have the nutrients in it in order for people to actually get that.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, too many people are eating processed food and fast food in almost every meal they have in areas where they don't necessarily need it.
Yeah.
Meaning people who aren't doing shit or barely doing anything are eating processed food. Whereas if I've got a more indigenous type person or somebody, or let's just call it a homeless person who's constantly walking, begging, like moving constantly, doing that, processed food plays a very critical role in keeping that person alive and somewhat healthy.
Yeah.
And people don't get that. Like they're not, they just want to throw the baby out with bathwater with everything.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. I mean, I spoke to, I think next week on my podcast, I spoke to Sandra Khan from, who wrote Jaws. And we did a whole podcast, and, you know, again, kind of going into not only destroying potentially environment, you know, but by spheres and all sorts, but like, you know, even our faces and our jaws and our airways, and, you know, how in the last 10,000 years, like, well, even more, 500 years, but like since the beginning of agriculture, do you know what I mean? Again, we've just kind of thought we knew better, and actually the more we look at it, the more we're just destroying our faces as well as like everything else.
Yes.
Which again, if we then go back to those physiology first principles, I guess, of like those primary emotions, how much is that then driving our inability to have any control over our emotions?
Well, here's the thing: is we're so like everything we've done, we like to pat ourselves on the back so much, and I it's not to say technology and, you know, things like aren't great, but we're still looking for people to solve problems to things that have been a part of the problem.
Yeah.
And, you know, with emotions, the problem is people buy on emotions and they justify with facts. And because of the amount of information that we have now, they can find a fact on anything.
Yeah. Yeah.
And emotions play one of the most critical roles in how we move forward. And yet, as I stated earlier, they were never intended for long-term things. And so if you can wrap your head around that, is an emotion is there for short-term. Why? If you can become observant of your thoughts and emotions, you can become much more aware and conscious and clear of what's going on.
Yeah. Which is where,
and the time to do that. Unfortunately, nobody wants to spend time with themselves like that.
But that's where essentially this stuff does come to the breath of like having the ability to have some kind of volition around your breath, to actually be able to take 2 seconds to tune in is where really the breath becomes the beginning of the important side of this work. Do you know what I mean? Without kind of diving huge into all of the breathwork stuff, you know, the basis of, you know, and again, this kind of goes back to almost where we started with spiritual backgrounds, and those people having more of not a solid background, but having more of an idea of, you know, the monks and the yogis and the Taoists and whatever else, having a spiritual practice which guides them through the breath 99% of the time, all of those practices are based in and around the breath. But to be able to observe and be able to and witness what you're thinking, feeling, sensing, emoting, to then allow you to either fucking react or not.
Yeah. Well, why am I having this emotion? Right.
Yeah.
Why, what's going on? Why am I sad right now? That thing that happened back there, what's happening in front of me?
Yeah. I don't know, because I'm fucking too busy looking behind me.
Exactly. Right. Like it'll get to that point. Like if you do the work, if you're allowed to sit there. But so bodies typically, so the human body, any body, right, including plants, have rules of association to prevent toxicity or damage.
Mm-hmm.
And when taken out of their natural environment or domesticated, those rules of association start to diminish. And we start to no longer pay attention to what those are. That's why, as what I was alluding to there, was we've advanced supposedly as a society, like especially technologically, in ways that we cannot keep up with biologically.
Yeah.
But we have not progressed emotionally.
No. Yeah.
In fact, it's getting worse and worse and worse.
It's almost like one of those kind of as one goes, I can't remember what you call it, as like one pushes, the other one just
look
pushes
at
back.
Social media as an example, and it's not a negative unless that's how you want to look at it, right?
Yeah.
But you've given people the opportunity to come on to a place and think that their opinion matters.
Yeah.
On
every day, every 5 minutes.
Everybody's got their own platform, and they're on there scrolling and liking and then commenting or getting pissed off about something or even like, look, yay, you're the best. Like, I'll be honest, I almost look at all of that the same.
Yeah.
And that'll flip some people's lids, because it's like, oh my God, like, why would he say that? Like, I think he does like great work. And it's like, look, I appreciate that, but I'm not doing this so that you tell me that.
Yeah. No, 100%.
I'm doing this because I know what I've experienced and used with other people and seen it change their lives in a way that is moving society back to a place to actually get more emotionally intelligent.
Yes.
You thinking you need to insert your comment, your opinion, your political side, all of that. And let's not make any mistake. I have played a part in all of that. Right? I've had to do work around all of this stuff, right? I've had to learn what it's like to be a monk. That was what I had to do. I needed to go and do that and take part in that and spend the better part of a year really understanding a lot of this stuff. And then taking that year and then exploring even deeper and spending the last 5 years really shredding all of that stuff down to go, why do I care so much when somebody says something about me? Like, why do I dance like why am I a people pleaser?
Yeah.
Right? Why do I like to please people? Oh, where does that stem from? And why am I hanging on to something that happened back there and not looking at what's right in front of me and the work that I'm doing and I'm passionate about? And it becomes difficult because we're so attached to these emotions that we think that this is who we are.
Yeah.
We think we are the identity of what we do.
Yeah.
When in fact,
Which again, but that then leads into like, I guess, all of these, like, I think, and I guess, that can give you an identity, but at the same time, then again, it's that identification with the identity, it kind of goes into a bit like, I guess, with your background, with like endurance running, endurance stuff, or with like, you know, yogis, with getting like super, like they do nothing but, you know what I mean? It's so fixated.
Oh yeah,
yeah. It happens in every single thing, but you know, you kind of, I'm always a bit of a flapper. I kind of go, a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and you know, I never really 100% balls deep kind of commit to something. But like, you can almost, when people are doing that, you, like my wife and I are kind of always joke of when some of our associates, people that we know are kind of getting seriously into running, it's a bit like, what are they running away from? And you know, it's not always the case.
I can't tell you how many times I heard that when I was in ultra running. People are like, what are you running from? Why are you doing, why would you do that? No, you know, like, look, I think Bruce Lee will probably be ahead of his time until the human race doesn't exist.
Yeah. Rob and I had this little chat about that too.
Yeah. Like, you
just so like
figured it out, man.
Philosophy, man. He was so ahead of the game.
I think he figured it out, and you know, it's the concept of be like water. It's like, look, I have routines and things I like to do, but I also I like to do new things as well, and engage in new and go learn, you know, new things. And that's the problem. That's what getting old is we start to do the same thing day in, day out.
Nice and safe.
Yeah. And until it becomes, I'm in front of a screen most of the time, getting my information from whatever's in front of me versus the information that's out there, like in this world, this beautiful world that exists.
And how you can experience that in that N=1 way, which is, I mean, like you've said, how much you've learned through exploration and self-experimentation.
Yeah, I mean, it shows up in everything we do. I mean, that's why we do this N=1 stuff.
Like,
it only takes a couple things for us to do where we can expose somebody's habits, behavior, avoidant or protective. Yeah. Right. And you know, it's simple. We give them some physical exercise after we give them some very calm stuff to do, and then all of a sudden you implement some sort of variable, but you don't mention anything about performance, and all of a sudden they're thinking about how many reps or how heavy or how long they can go, and it's like, that wasn't a part of the equation, so why did that show up?
Yeah.
Not a part of anything we were discussing, and yet it showed up for you. Why?
Yeah.
Well, I'm basing who I am on this. That's usually what people arrive at. And it's like, why? How does that define you?
Yeah. Maybe do you really want that to define you?
Maybe your body's telling you something right now, like, that's it. And why aren't you, what other things could be happening as a result of that? Are you being paid to be a professional athlete? No. Okay. So why is that
so important? Yeah, for sure. Cool. Well, I can't believe it's basically nearly been an hour, because I could probably just feel like we could probably just chat for ages. But I've got one thing I've finished all my episodes with, which is basically in a shortest, like 2-minute little clip, I guess. It's called Move, Breathe, Live. Hopefully trying to get people to figure out how to move, breathe better, to live a better, happier life, essentially. So in and around those things, what could you recommend, hopefully, that someone could take away and they could kind of go implement something in their life that would just give them a better idea of dealing with shit, I guess?
Walking changed my life.
Yeah.
As much as anything else has changed my life. Just going and walking. So
not on a treadmill.
No. Just go outside and go walk. And go long enough to where you clear your thoughts. Control your breathing at some point throughout the day to literally set the basis of what that's how you actually can get conscious control of what's going on, right?
Yeah.
Is if I can control my breathing at first, and then take that to being able to be aware of your unconscious breathing.
Mm-hmm.
So getting to a point to where you can be aware of your unconscious breathing. And that takes some time, but you can get there. You know, and then I think people are way too fixated on arriving at a success that they don't know how to define. And the only success I really think that exists is the one of being of service.
Mm-hmm.
And so whatever you figure out through your process of practice, and I just described some sort of a practice. I didn't tell you what sort of breathing to do,
or how far to
walk, or
where
or how to go walk. You know, like just go for a walk or go move, and then go do a little breathing and be more aware of what you're thinking and feeling. And when you start to get to a place to where the light bulb starts to go off, start sharing that.
Yeah, love it. That's kind of, well, hopefully that's kind of where I feel like I'm at these days. So you know, at least it's a step on the right road. I remember, like, just briefly, you kind of said something very similar. You had something in and around that with Rangan Chatterjee. It was that kind of idea of, like, especially around social media, of just like, you know, if you want to show your fucking ass off, go and do it. But, you know, really, this is like the perfect tool to share, like, knowledge and information. Like,
and I mean, that was actually my point about social media is if you're looking at it as this thing, like, I get to go see who's saying what and judge them on that.
Yeah.
You missed the point.
Yeah.
And you're one of those people who actually needs to invest in emotional control.
Yeah.
And intelligence in a capacity that I did. I didn't have these tools, and I needed to learn what they were. I mean, I get stuff all the time from people losing their minds, you know, and it's just like, wow, like, this is really how you think it's okay. Like, this is how you behave. And it's like, dude, there's such an opportunity to actually create a better place, but it's no wonder why it's falling apart, because so many people just don't want to actually do that.
No. I think, yeah, definitely.
They want to tell people how to live.
Yeah. And, like, in and around, like, I'm kind of reading, watching lots about the whole regenerative agriculture stuff these days. And, man, that whole meat versus vegan thing right now is, I mean, it's hilarious to sit back and watch.
I got a book for people who really want to understand this stuff that would blow everybody's mind. It's called Nourishment. Yeah, it's by a guy by the name of Fred Ponsner. And
okay. Write that down.
It's Fred Provenza, sorry. And he breaks down. So he talks about plants a lot. It's about plants, herbivores, carnivores, and people.
Right.
Everything dies.
Yeah.
Plants have a consciousness and plants have more senses than we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's a process to this whole thing. And I'm not suggestive, like, of any diet anybody needs to subscribe to. But if you don't think that us partaking in this process isn't moving forward, you're a part of the problem. And this guy breaks that down pretty well. And
amazing.
You know, like, look, you should be eating plants. You should also be probably eating meat, unless it's like toxic to you. Right?
Yeah.
A lot of people are toxic to plants, but this book is mind blowing on the depth of where he goes with it, and the understanding of the fact that some plants have upwards of 20 senses. Uh-huh. And yeah, man, and it's nuts. Like, just to think about that and go, wow.
Yeah.
And I've long thought about this, and I'm like, I would bet based on the fact that plants do what they do for the planet. There's far more to them than we don't understand.
Yeah.
And we just think of everything as being like an animal is alive. No. The air, like we think we live on this planet. No, we live in this planet. The atmosphere is alive.
100%. Absolutely. We are nature. You know, it is
we
us.
Are.
It is us.
We're in this planet. We are not on it. We're in it.
Yeah.
And it's there's a lot we don't understand. And the only way and the cure for anything is understanding. So at any rate, take the time to go learn and understand things from a very large information gathering perspective, and understand we're never going to figure it out.
Look at all sides and fucking accept a little bit of everything.
Yep.
Sweet. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It was been an absolute pleasure to have you kind of chat some shit. It's been
thanks for having me.
We're up there, so cheers. Nice one. I'm gonna just